You talk too much. Not an insult, a diagnosis. Every time you over-explain yourself, you lose. Every time you fill silence with noise, you lose. Every time you announce your plans before executing them, you lose. And the worst part, nobody told you this was happening. They just quietly took notes. Here's what's actually going on when you speak and why the people in the room saying the least are winning the most. Think about the last networking event you went to. There was that one person, talking constantly, sharing their opinions, their struggles, their ideas, their plans, and there was someone else in the corner, quiet, nodding, asking one good question, then listening hard. Who do you think walked out with more power? Here's what most people get wrong about conversation. They think talking is connecting. It's not. Talking is giving. Every sentence you speak is data leaving your possession. Your opinions, your fears, your ambitions, your weaknesses. You hand them over freely, like a giveaway. And the person listening, they're collecting. Economists call it information asymmetry. One party in a transaction knows more than the other. In markets, that gap creates wealth. In conversations, it creates influence. The talker is the market. The listener is the investor. Now ask yourself, which one are you? Most people talk to feel seen. That's the trap. The need to be understood is real, but it's also expensive, because the moment you explain yourself, you've handed over the map. People now know your pressure points. They know what flattery works on you. They know what threat will make you fold. Silence protects that. Silence keeps a monopoly on your own mind. And in a world where attention is currency, scarcity is power. The less you reveal, the more people project onto you. They fill your silence with their assumptions. They assume you're deeper than you are, calmer than you feel, more certain than you might be. Let them. That projection, that's social capital you didn't have to spend a word to earn. But there's a darker side to overtalking nobody warns you about. Stay with me, because this next part explains why smart people talk themselves out of opportunities constantly. There's an old principle from Japanese swordsmanship, specifically from the Buzen era. The belief was simple: a warrior who shouts is already defeated. Think about what that means. Before the blade even moves, the man who announces his intention has lost. Why? Because he leaked. He turned internal energy into external noise. The Stoics had a word for this: pneuma. It was the vital force, the animating energy inside you. They believed undisciplined speech drained it. And they weren't wrong just early. Modern psychology backs this up. When you tell someone your goal, your brain registers it as partially accomplished. The social acknowledgement gives you a dopamine hit. And then the actual work gets harder, because you've spent the reward before earning it. This is why people who announce goals rarely finish them. And people who stay quiet just do tend to shock everyone. They weren't hiding. They were saving. There's another piece to this. Harder to hear. If you have to explain your boundaries, you've already failed to embody them. Read that again. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. A man who has to tell everyone he doesn't tolerate disrespect is already tolerating it. His words are a substitute for his actual energy. The person who has genuine self-possession doesn't explain their limits. They just don't move past them. And people feel it. That's the empty vessel paradox. The vessel that makes the most noise is the one clanging around empty. The full one moves in silence. And here's where it gets practical, because knowing this changes how you show up in rooms. When you walk into a meeting and say very little, people assume you've already thought through everything. When you pause before answering, people assume the answer is important. When you don't react to a provocation, people assume your baseline is untouchable. None of this requires a single word. It requires that you understand. Silence is not absence. It's presence in its most concentrated form. But here's the thing about words that nobody talks about. They're not just sounds. they're financial instruments, and most people are living in debt. Every time you make a promise, you create a liability. Every claim you stake a bill you'll eventually owe. This isn't metaphor. This is moral accounting. Think about the loudest person in your life. Big announcements, bold declarations, constant updates on what they're going to do. Now think about their follow-through. There's a pattern, right? Over-talkers are living in intellectual bankruptcy. They write checks with their mouths, they can't cash with their actions. And here's the brutal truth. Every unmet promise destroys credibility faster than any mistake would, because mistakes are understood. Broken words are character data. People file that information. They remember. Silence, on the other hand, creates zero debt. You can't be held to what you never said. You can't disappoint with results you never previewed. The quietest people in any room are often the most trusted because their words, when they come, are rare. And rarity creates value. When someone who barely speaks finally says something, the room leans in. That's not an accident. That's compound interest on silence. Every time they stayed quiet when others rambled, they were making a deposit. Every time they chose not to share an opinion, the bank grew. And when they finally withdrew, the room paid attention. This is what separates someone who's mysterious from someone who's just quiet. Mysteriously silent people aren't withholding randomly. They're selective, intentional. They've learned to treat speech like a resource, not a reflex. Now here's the part most self-improvement content skips entirely. Because this isn't just about strategy, it's about something deeper, something you're actually doing to yourself every time you overtalk. Constant talking is the conversational equivalent of junk food. Quick, satisfying, empty. You get a hit from the attention, you feel connected for a moment, but the soul is still starving. Here's the neuroscience in plain terms. Talking about yourself activates the same brain regions as sex and food. It's literally pleasurable. So, of course you do it. Of course you reach for it. The problem is, like any dopamine hit, the return diminishes. You need more. You get louder, more extreme, more emotional, all to get the same feeling you used to get from a single honest conversation. That's addiction. Mild, socially acceptable, but real. Silence breaks that cycle. Not comfortable silence, disciplined silence. The kind where you sit in a room and don't reach for your phone. Where someone tells you their opinion and you don't immediately fire back yours. Where a compliment lands and you just say thank you instead of deflecting or escalating. That kind of silence is a fast for the ego. And like any fast, the first part is brutal. You feel irrelevant, invisible, boring, because the ego needs to know it's being seen, and when you deny it, that it panics. But on the other side of that discomfort is something rare: clarity. When you stop performing, you start thinking. When you stop narrating your life, you start living it. The people who scare others in rooms aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones who seem like they don't need the room at all. That's what disciplined silence builds. Over time. Not arrogance, not coldness, sufficiency. The sense that your value doesn't require a single witness. So here's where this lands. You're not talking too much because you're stupid. You're talking too much because nobody told you that silence is a skill, that listening is intelligence gathering, that your words are a currency you're spending every time you open your mouth, and that the most powerful people you've ever been in a room with, they probably said the least. Start small. One conversation. Ask one good question, then shut up completely. Don't fill the pause. Don't rescue the silence. Just sit in it and watch what you learn. The world will tell you everything if you stop interrupting it.